Hey there, I am back with another deck review. Today I'm going to be looking at the white Monolith playing cards from Thirdway Industries and designer Giovanni Meroni. This deck is a recent Kickstarter campaign and it's interesting on a few different levels. So first off, from a design and technical standpoint, it's kind of an experimental deck on his part that goes into really heavy use of some Pantone inks. Pantone inks are just kind of different inks that can produce a different spectrum of colors, including most notably metallic inks and fluorescent inks. So you'll see those used pretty heavily here. But from a story standpoint, because that's always kind of a highlight of the Thirdway decks, this deck is inspired originally by Arthur C. Clarke's classic book and movie 2001 Space Odyssey back in 1968. And in that one, there were these monoliths that were created by ancient and all-powerful beings that were placed throughout the universe, and they were kind of symbols of ancient knowledge. So that was what inspired this, but it also draws inspiration from a lot of the different mythologies of the world. In fact, this story behind this deck is kind of presented as a base mythology, basically the faintly remembered stories on which all of the other mythologies are actually based. But let's take a look and see how it comes to life in this really beautiful deck here. So starting with the tuck case, you'll see here it is a silver ink all the way around. So it's a silver ink with this white on it. This particular one, it's interesting because I will say, depending on how you hold it or where you're looking at it from, it can look a little bit washed out, but really close up, you can see a lot of the detail. It's really quite beautiful. There are no words on it, so it's meant to be mysterious, kind of like the monoliths from the movie. And there's a lot of just cryptic symbology covering it all over. So you have a really bold border with this kind of coiled snake design going through it, a couple of eyes peeking out there, and then just really cryptic symbols all the way through. So you have these sort of circles and triangles. You have kind of a sun here in the middle radiating out. So lots of different symbols here. Get a little bit of a close-up so you can see some of that design. Very simple, but ornate at the same time. As you continue through to the sides, you have kind of a continuation of the same theme of design. So you have that snake kind of thing wrapped around a pole on one side, and then exactly the same on the other. You have your ad copy there on the bottom, and then a version of the back design of the cards here on the back, which as usual, we'll take a look at in a second. Top here just has the 4 suits, all in white. And then the inner flap, you have a little bit more of that symbology. You can see the planet Saturn floating out there, as well as this here, this 1100111111. This is actually 2019 written out in binary right there. So usually puts the year somewhere on there. That's in binary. And then silver here, and then no printing on the inside. So that is the tuck case. It's both beautiful and a little bit mysterious. Like I said, a little bit washed out for this particular color depending on angles, but really, I think just a great tuck case. So there's the tuck case. Let's look at the backs of the cards. So here's where you can really see some of the work with those Pantone inks coming out. So it's very heavily using the silver, so the entire background is that silver metallic ink. You can see that glow there. And you have a design that's really similar to what we're looking at on the back of the cards. So you have that border, again, with the coiled design all the way around, the eye at the top and the bottom, and then just tons of strange and interesting symbology all the way around. And the center kind of forms what looks a little bit like an eyeball with a sun in the middle. And then you have those pops in the center that really just stand out of that fluorescent green ink. Just a really bold design and really kind of out there. It's a really bright design, like the back of these quite a lot. I think the minute you open these, it's just kind of a jaw-dropping effect to me, that color mixture. I've never seen that on a deck, so really, really cool. So flipping over to the front, I'm going to go through these in a little bit of a different order than usual because I want to kind of tell a little bit of the story of the deck as we go through. So I mentioned this is kind of foundational mythology to all other mythologies. So the deck itself kind of follows a little bit of a creation story. So we'll talk through that as we run through the deck. So we're going to start with the spades, and the spades represent the ancient gods of the void, which is basically everything which can't be seen or touched. Starting with the ace of spades, you see the large spade in the middle with kind of a swirly pattern that's centering in on that eye in the center. More of that symbology, very similar to what we're looking at on the tuck case, forming that background in white. And then now a little bit bolder, you have that border that we look at in a few different places with that coil design and the eyes. Just a little bit of a darker blue ink. The spade pip and the index here in the corner are actually done in kind of a dark navy blue. So that's the color on this one, not quite true black. And you have a custom font on those. And as you go through, very simple design on the number cards. You have the classic placement of the pips, maybe a little bit closer to the center to form room for this really bold, just plain white border around here, around the pips themselves. And then you have the index in the corner and this little kind of line-based design running down the sides just to give it a little bit more interest. And then of course you've got that full bleed silver ink background. So really nice, bold, and yet simple on the number cards as you go through. When we get to the quartz, we're going to see the first of those ancient gods of the void. So the Jack here represents the god of space. Basically, he rules everything which is in between the planets, in between the objects. So he's everything else, basically. The Queen is the goddess of absolute zero, so the absence of heat and motion. That's what she rules over. And then the King is the most powerful of the gods here, the most destructive, the god of eternity. So basically, he's the one who eventually will destroy all things. So you can see that represented by the hourglass in the center and the chains that are binding you to that time. So a really beautiful set of quartz. They're done in that kind of dark blue ink with tons of pops of that fluorescent green to give it a lot of different little bits of interest. And as you look at these, you'll see all kinds of little details, the cloak of the god of the void with the stars going through it, just all kinds of small details running through these. So really beautiful and interesting to look at. We're going to jump to the diamonds here. So the diamonds represent the gods of energy, who are essentially the fuel for the universe. So here's the diamond. So all of the aces are going to have this kind of custom design featuring that background and a much bolder border than the other number cards, and then kind of a larger pip in the center. And then, of course, the red now on these is done a little bit more of, I'll call it kind of a maroon color. It's a little bit darker than maybe you've seen on other red cards. So you go through these, similar design, other than they're going to be the red instead of that dark blue. And then here are the quartz. So the Jack of Diamonds here represents gravity. So he's the god of gravity. So he's the one who basically took all the planets and gave them order. So he brought order to all of the planets. And you kind of see this coiled design around him, almost flowing into this center of power, which is represented within his shields. And you can see how he's using his power to bind and bring order to all of this matter that exists around him. Kind of cool. You got the planet out here. You have little shards and pieces that are representing bits of matter there. The Queen is the goddess of heat and is the one who ultimately makes life possible through heat and through fire. And so she's got this really beautiful feather or kind of like flames radiating out of both of her shield and her helmet, and then holding the scepter on the side. And then the King is the god of light. So he and the goddess of heat, they were the ones who actually combined to make the stars. And the god of heat is celebrated throughout mythology as the god of the sun. So again, that kind of really beautiful radiant pattern on the shield and really bold yellow colors on the helmet. So really cool on those. Then you have kind of a representation of the sun there in the corner as well. Now jumping into the clubs, you're looking at the gods of materia, basically the ones who created all of the planets. So again, a custom design on the ace there, and then back to the blue color for the numbers. And then here are your three gods. So the Jack of Clubs represents all solids, and you can see the planets and shapes representing matter throughout, and lots of that bold yellow pops going all the way through. So really cool on that one. The Queen, so you have the solid, then you have the goddess of liquid. And so she's got this really kind of flowing design both to her hair and the shapes around her, kind of representing different waves. So she represents all of liquid. And then the god of atmosphere. So he represents the gaseous state of things. So you can see the wisps kind of representing gas coming through in his design, and kind of more of an airy feel to the ribbons going around him. And last but not least are the gods of life. And I say but not least, these are actually considered in this universe the weakest of the gods. but they're also the ones who bring meaning to the rest of creation. So there's your ace, and then running through the numbers back to that kind of maroon color. And then you get to the three gods here. So the three gods here represent Flora. So Flora, usually represented as a female character, is represented as a male in this particular one. Flora actually created the very first life, an apple tree, an important part of the overall mythology here. But you can see the plants and flowers represented there. The Queen of Hearts is Fauna. Fauna actually created what he calls the firstborns, the first humans. So created humans and animals. And then the King of Hearts is the god of intellect. It's actually the weakest of the gods because he used part of his divinity to infuse humans with intelligence. So you can see that he looks a little bit older because he gave up a small portion of his divinity. So there's the King of Hearts. Then you get to the rest of the extra cards. You do get some extra cards on this. Get this one out of the way. You do get a double backer here. So you do get one gaff card in this. And then you get three what I'll consider jokers or extra cards that are part of the story. So these two right here represent the firstborns, or Adam and Eve if you look into like Christian mythology. You got Eve over here in that maroon color, and then Adam over here in that blue. And with Eve, you can see, for example, the apple here, which in Christianity is a big part of the story. To me, seeing this kind of coil design now makes me think of the snake, which is also really prominent in that story. But in essence, in this mythology, the firstborns, once they were infused with intellect, one of the first things they did was to destroy the apple tree, which was the first creation of life, if you remember, that Flora had created. So there are the two firstborns, Adam and Eve. And then the last extra card that you get is, her name is Sol. It's essentially the stars. So Sol was created through a combination of the Queen of Diamonds and the King of Diamonds, basically the goddess of heat and the god of light. The two of them combined to create the stars. And this is a super bold card, obviously featuring tons of yellow ink and a lot of brightness, which is kind of fitting with the stars. So there you go, that is Sol. So just a really beautiful deck, a ton of the mythology. I know this is a little bit of a longer video, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a flavor of the mythology because I think this one is really, really cool. I'll put links to where you can read more about the story if you're interested. Giovanni puts together just tons of interesting stories built around his deck. So there's a lot more to read than just what I've given here. As far as handling a deck, it's a USPCC deck, so it's going to handle really beautifully. Fans are going to be really, really nice, and that silver ink, just slightly broken up by that white, looks really, really good in the fan. Cuts, all that are going to work really, really well. So no complaints on the handling. And as far as use of the deck, like most, I think, Thirdway decks, it's primarily going to be an art deck. It's really more about looking at the story, finding details in the courts, and just really appreciating the artwork for it. That said, I suppose you could use this for gameplay. I think a lot of the elements are probably a little bit distracting for it. You could probably use it for cardistry. It is a beautiful and bold deck in those flashes of fluorescent color. I'm sure you can make that look interesting. But really, it is first and foremost an art deck. So there you go. That is it for this one. The White Monolith playing cards from Thirdway Industries. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you have other questions. Definitely check out more of Thirdway Industries, their decks, and the stories behind them. And I will see you for the next one.